Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going over a new method that I found and a way that you can use an acrylic powder with a gel base and get the same look as an acrylic, just like I did here. I posted this on my Facebook account and had quite a few people ask how I did it. So I'm just making this video. I am definitely not like a pro at this variation or this method, and it's something I just learned. But I'll give you the tips and tricks that I learned when I was researching, and then just some of the info that I kind of came across. So if you are still interested in watching, please continue to do so, and thank you again for clicking onto today's video. So I don't normally do voiceovers, and I apologize if the sound on this one is pretty bad. If so, there may be spots that are a little bit louder that I go in to actually do like a voiceover, or I dub on top of this one. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and show you the steps that I did. So the first thing is you are going to want to take a cuticle pusher to push back the cuticles. I'm not actually going to rough up any of the natural nail, because when I go in to blend the tip, that's when I'm going to use the file all over the entire surface. I know that you can do it differently, but again, this is just how I did these. So I'm going to go ahead and just push those back ever so slightly. I did just take off a set recently, so there's not much that I have to push back here. But just to kind of go over all the steps on what I did exactly. Once you have this done, I am going to go ahead and get my tips sized. So the ones that I use are inside of this here. They are the ones that Long Hair Pretty Nail uses, and excuse the package they're in because the other one broke, so I had to just use this one, which originally had my foils in it. So this was really cheap. This was like on Shein for $1 or $2. I still have all the foils if you want to see how I store those now, but essentially these are small and travel friendly, and I put my tips inside of them now so I can take them with me since I do travel to do nail services. But let's go ahead and get sized out. And what is this? We'll say that's my middle. We'll go a size smaller. Okay, so we'll say that's that. Maybe one size smaller. That's going to be entirely too small, I think. Oh, well, maybe not. Okay, pointer. So the glue that I'm going to use is just my regular KDS glue, just to get the tips on today. And then while these are setting up, since it does take a little bit longer, I did want to go ahead and talk about some of the information that I found when I went down the rabbit hole of like this type of dip method. So originally I had bought these dip powders from iGel Beauty with the intent to use them solely as dipping, and then to have them kind of on hand as well as like the Kiara Sky ones, which are all-in-ones, and you can use that as a dip or as an acrylic. And for whatever reason, I just was not having satisfactory results with the dip powder like liquids. I tried cheap ones on Amazon. I tried expensive ones like the Kiara Sky system, which the brush kept getting hard, and I know part of that is user error. But as I researched it a little bit more, I found out that the traditional liquids do contain ingredients that are pretty much the same as crazy glue. So essentially you're kind of just coating your entire nail in glue, whether it's this type of glue, crazy glue. It's just a glue which causes fumes, and they can give you flu-like symptoms, which is also known as the dip flu. And I did experience those symptoms. I thought I was getting sick, but as soon as I stopped trying the dip methods, it kind of went away. So because I'm currently pregnant and not looking to increase the chances of having any flu-like symptoms or just not feeling well overall, I then went to doing traditional acrylic and using them that way. But I live in Nevada and it's super hot, and I didn't want the smell inside, so I had to go outside. And with doing that, it was just setting up entirely too fast. So between the smell and the setup, it's just not working for me. So I was talking to a friend and kind of researching different ways to use the dip powders. And what I came across was this method, and actually Young Nails does sell a method pretty much the same as what I'm going to do today. So rather than using a traditional dip liquid, they do have a conversion base. I don't have that. I'll have to try it, but essentially it is a gel base coat, and then you would stick their slick pour acrylic powder over it while it's still wet and cure using a UV or LED light. And essentially I'm doing the same exact thing, just with a different brand. If you're interested in me trying that version to see if it's any different or any better, I am open to doing so. Just let me know in the comments below. But for today, we're going to be using the iGel Beauty Dip and Dap powder. Again, these can be used as traditional acrylic as well as dipping powders. And the color I'm going to use is just the clear, so we can see how it looks and so I can get them ready for artwork. And then I do prefer to use the Coupa Gel Affinity. This is for two reasons. The first one is the brush on it. It's really small and really precise, so I can get really close to the cuticle without flooding it. And then the formula, I don't know if you can see, but it's really sticky. It's one of the thicker bases, so I do like to use this one. It's a little bit pricier, but I definitely think it works better than anything sold on like Amazon, at least that I've currently used or tried. But the first thing that we're gonna do, of course, is cut these down to size. So I do want them to all match. They're just gonna be square. And I'll say that that's pretty close. I'm not going to make them perfect because, like I said, I am going to go ahead and take these off, but for video purposes we'll keep them at that length, just so you can see that you can build some structure. I'm still learning. This is the first time that I've used this method and tried it, and I just had a lot of questions about how I did it and kind of the steps used. So that's what this video is for. So I can probably build this apex better if I actually went in and did some additional coats in the center, but for now I'll just show you what the steps that I learned are. So once I have it trimmed down to size, you are gonna want to rough up the surface so that the gel has something to stick to. Gel just isn't gonna stick to anything like this that is very shiny. So by blending the tip in and additionally roughing up the surface of the natural nail and the tip, then the gel is gonna stick a lot better. To do that, I'm just gonna take my E-file here, and I'm going to just use this bit. So this is just a fine grit, and you can also use medium. I wouldn't do anything further than that since it is going to be touching the natural nail, but we're going to use this at about a 4,000 RPM to rough up the surface. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and dust these off. And then by using pure acetone, this is gonna melt the tip further, so it's gonna blend even better, as well as dehydrate and cleanse the surface of the nail. So we're gonna use that over the entire surface. Okay, So if you look now, everything pretty much looks blended. You can't really see where the tip was placed. So that's what you want it to look like. That way there's no really bad bumps or anything underneath the dip powder that you're gonna use. And then moving on to kind of the tips that I found that helped me out. First, let me go ahead and put this, I'm gonna use this. You are going to wanna rotate, especially if you have a color that you're gonna be using instead of clear. I always recommend doing clear though as a base, even if it's just thin and over the entire nail, 1 or 2 pores. This is gonna make it so your natural nail doesn't get stained. Plus clear adheres better to the natural nail plate. So it makes it easier for changing and so that you don't get any lifting later on. But for today, we're just gonna do clear. I'm not gonna do any colors. If I was going to, I would do like 2 dips of this and then do the remaining like building of the apex and everything else in the color that I was gonna use. And then cap it with the clear. So that way when I file, I'm not filing away any of the color. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is actually prep and prime. So these are the prep and primers that I use. They're from Nail Couture, but you can use any brand choice that you want to. Their prep is just their dehydrator, so we're gonna do that first and only on the natural nail plate. And this is gonna further dehydrate even more so than the acetone did, just to get the natural nail ready. Next, I'll be taking just a bit of their primer. Okay, perfect. So the first thing I'm going to do is place the dip right across where the natural nail meets with the tip that we applied. And this is going to be the strongest bond so that it holds that tip on better. And then we'll start building our apex and finally the entire nail. It is helpful, I find, to have a dipping system. So this here is what I'll be using today. It's just a small tray inside that catches the powders, and then I'll be putting it back inside of here. And instead of using this little tool to pour, I do think it's a little more precise for me just to use a tip like this, because then there's a point to it, and so I can dip it and actually get really close to the cuticle line without actually flooding it and getting up on the cuticle. If you do that, then that is going to cause lifting and cause a space for water to get under as well. So we definitely don't want to do that. You are going to need a brush to brush away any of the additional powder, especially after curing, so that way you're not cross-contaminating the base of choice. And I would still recommend having a base and top gel for this system that you don't necessarily use with other systems other than this. So to start off, we're going to take a little bit here and just apply it right across where the nail meets. And it's okay for this to be a little bit bigger, because again, this is going to start to build the structure of that apex so that the nail doesn't end up being flat and cracking later on. So you still want to think about apex, especially with length. Now, if you're doing shorter, you don't necessarily need to do this step, but because I have tips on, then I definitely want some kind of structure. And then we're going to pour just right over that. Okay, I'm going to just tap these into here, and it's all going to collect inside of the basin, but that's what that's going to look like. It is still wet, so we're going to go ahead and cure that for 30 seconds inside of our LED lamp. Okay, once those come out, you'll be safe to go ahead and dust away, because the gel is now cured underneath, and this is going to leave it looking just like this. And because it's clear, you're not going to see it, but there is a cap that's been formed where the natural nail met with the tip, so it has a little bit more structural integrity and it doesn't break there. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same step one more time for all 3 nails. And then while we're talking about structural integrity, there was a conversation had on my Facebook account actually about this method. And I did find out that this is actually a preferred method in some other countries. They actually don't use monomer at all, which was really cool to find out. Additionally, this is going to give you about the same structure or strength as using a hard gel would, or like an acrogel, a hybrid gel, whatever you want to call it. And this is because you're mixing both systems of gel and acrylic together. So that's something that I learned, and I thought was something that I should share. So it's not like you're just encapsulating the acrylic. There is an actual name for what's going on, but chemically it's gonna act the same way that those types of gels work without you having to buy something that is pre-mixed. I like that because I have a lot of acrylic powders and dip powders that are sitting here, and I don't necessarily have to buy an entire new product. So for me, it works out. For others though, if you're just getting into it, it may be easier to purchase a poly gel or an acrogel that's already pre-mixed for you, so that you don't have to necessarily do these steps. You would just put that on and then use the slip solution or alcohol to mold it to your client's shape or length. I prefer the hard gels to be used for structure, for like extensions or really long nails. And then anything like medium length and shorter, you could use the hard gel as well, but I actually recommend using like a hybrid or a poly gel that's soak off capable, just so that way you'll be able to take it off a little bit easier. So now that we have that on, and this is what that looks like, it's not very thick now, but it is going to start building some of that apex for us. I'm going to go ahead and take the same gel. We're going to be repeating steps and layering. So we're going to go right down the middle of the nail only. And this is going to start building that little bit of a curve and apex still. So we're still working on the structure of the nail rather than coating the entire nail all at one time. I will say this method is not necessarily the fastest, but I do find it to be super easy to do, especially if you're just starting. And I'm just starting this whole dip journey. I just know that the traditional dipping wasn't working for me. If you have a recommendation on a dip powder that maybe you had symptoms and then decided to switch and didn't anymore, please let me know in the comments below, because I do still want to learn more methods, but for now this seems to work. Let's go ahead and get that cured. And each time that I'm curing, I'm just doing 30 seconds in between, because these are thin layers. You don't want to layer it too thick and have to take even more time curing. So 30 seconds in between is more than enough time for the gel base to set. It is still going to be a little bit sticky, but that's totally fine, because in the end we'll wipe everything off before filing. And I have some tips and tricks on how to get this to set a little bit better than just setting it in the UV light as well. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and get the excess off. It's really important each time before going back in with the next layer to take off anything that's on the surface. Anything on the surface is going to cause oils or any debris. Anything like that is going to stop the gel from actually adhering well to the layer underneath. As well, of course, just it's not sanitary. So I am going to do a second coat just down the middle of the nail. And if you notice, I'm not going all the way back to the cuticle line yet. We're just kind of focusing on where we're going to want our apex to be placed. Tap off the excess. Just be very careful you don't bump the nail, because the gel is still, of course, not cured and it's soft. So let's get that cured. Again, another 30 seconds. And then in between, I am kind of cleaning this up. I don't want this to be messy, because as it's collecting inside, we are going to be putting that back in. So you want to be very careful about cross-contamination. These are great because it has 2 separate ones. So if you're doing different colors, you can actually take out, say, this top tray that has clear. And then if you had a color that you were working on, like a pink or anything like that, that could be in the bottom tray. So you can kind of filter through. I just find that super convenient. If you are just doing the clear though, and then gonna do like color on top of this, as far as gel paint goes, you wouldn't necessarily need it, but it's convenient to have both. And then to show you kind of how this works out, underneath here, it is capturing all of what we were using today. So we can just filter that back in at the end of service. Or if you're doing longer nails like these ones, kind of periodically just check and see if that's full. So now that we kind of have this apex structurally starting to get built, I don't know if you can see the little bit of a hump there, we're gonna go ahead and start coating the entire nail. So at this point is when you're gonna want to start pretty much where you're at. So same place, about 3/4 of the way down, but we're gonna start coating the entire bottom of this nail rather than just the center. And then because gel is self-setting and it's easier to work with, I think, than the standard liquid, you don't have to be as fast because it's not going to start setting until you put it into the lamp, which gives you a lot of time to work with getting really close to the sidewalls and cuticle without actually flooding them and being in such a hurry to like rush and dip your hand. I also do think it's easier if you do the pour method that we're doing rather than dipping, just because with gel it's still soft and wet, and placing it into it can cause some weird and like funky little ripples, and we don't want that. We definitely want to have less filing at the end. So we'll go ahead and pour this on. And with this, more is more. So don't worry about wasting of product because it's catching underneath. And you also don't want to not coat somewhere. So I go over these quite a bit just to make sure everything is fully covered. Let's go ahead and tap off the excess on each one and get that cured. Again, just for the 30 seconds in between. And we're gonna repeat this now. So we're just gonna keep layering until we get to the thickness that we actually want it to be at. Additionally, every time that you layer, you're gonna wanna move the gel back just a bit closer to the cuticle. So if your nails are shorter, of course, you don't have to do as many layers, and you can probably start at the halfway point and kind of just do maybe 2 more dips, or pours in this case. Since our nails are a bit longer, we did start further down because we definitely are going to have more layers, and we don't want it to have this huge hump right where the cuticle is at. So we started it at 3/4, and then we're going to go halfway and a little bit closer each time. So now this time, instead of going right where that is, we're going to go a little bit behind it, again coating the entire surface and then pouring after, and just doing this in a layered method until we get all the way back to the cuticle line. This is what it's starting to look like. I'm still going to do 2 more coats really quickly so I can get closer to the cuticle line, and then we will get into file and shaping. And additionally, you can buy this actual like system with the gel base and no odor and acrylic powder from Young Nails. They actually do the exact same thing, but they have what's called their conversion base and their slick pour powders, which can also be used with monomer. So they're 2-in-1s as well. they have really great videos here on YouTube, and that's kind of where I learned a little bit more about theirs. But that's also another option, or a couple of options, I guess. So for this one, again, I'm curing a full 60 seconds. We're gonna be done with this, so I'm just gonna go ahead and clean this up while that's in. Take this out because we don't need that anymore. It's a little hard to do with one hand, but we can get it done. Let's put that back in, and as you can see, you don't use a lot. So when I did this and I put it online, I had a couple of people kind of in the comments come at me and say that I was wasting product and it was just not worth it. But to me, if I'm going to be utilizing clear, which you technically would buy bigger than the smaller colors, and that's what you're going to use more so than anything else anyways, and I'm utilizing a base that I almost never touch, to me, I'm actually using products that wouldn't have otherwise been used. I know a lot of people that don't actually use a base coat when they are doing like their gel polishes, so it kind of just sits there. And most companies nowadays will sell a base with a top coat, or the base is cheaper. So to me, it's actually not wasting or more expensive. It was a way for me to use what I had already. So this is what we look like. We've done the full cure. If you want to hear, they sound like traditional acrylic. They're fully set up. So we're going to move into our filing and shaping. Before we do that though, I do want to share kind of a tip that I learned. Let's get this closed first. And what I learned was you want something like an alcohol that is at least 70% or higher to help further set. So because we don't have an activator like you would with a traditional set, and because acrylic does dry in the air, it's now mixed with the UV, so it is going to set that way. But I think it sets a little bit stronger, and this can totally be a me thing. But I was reading some comments, and as I was kind of down that rabbit hole per se of learning things, a lot of people used alcohol, sprayed on it at the end, and let that air dry. What I used was just, it's in this spray. It's probably has a little bit left of the Germex, but I did put a 91% alcohol inside. I think this one was only like a 60 originally. So this I just keep refilling because it's easy to just use it as a spray. And you'll let that air dry for a couple of seconds. Once that's done, then I do go ahead and just wipe away anything that's an excess on top of the nail. And I feel like that gets rid of if there was any type of stickiness from the gel at all. It would all be gone now. So final step before our final and curing, and after I've done that step, is to cure one more time for 60 seconds to make sure that I don't have anything sticky anywhere. Again, you may not necessarily have to do that step. That's just what I did and what I kind of researched.
Okay, so at this point, we've already cured finally for the 60 seconds, and this is what they look like. We are going to go ahead then and move into our file and shaping and buffing and get the desired look that we want. I'm going to go ahead and take this file. It's definitely loved, but it is a 80-100 grit, and I'm going to use the 80 grit just because it's a little bit more coarse. And then keep in mind, because we did use a dip powder, this is going to be a finer milled acrylic powder, so it's going to be a little bit easier, or at least I find it to be a little bit easier to actually file and shape. Now, I am going to also try this method with just traditional acrylic powder, and I know that's going to be a little bit harder to file, but I don't expect the results to be too much different other than getting to the filing process. So for here, I am just going to play a little bit of music so you can watch the filing and shaping before we get into the final picture. Okay, so now we're going to go back into the e-file here. I am going to change out the bit. I no longer need it to be the fine grit sanding band, but I am going to replace that with my Pana 5-in-1 medium grit. And I use this to seal the cuticle and then to further help with shaping overall. So I'll put that in and then carefully run it. I believe it was at 7,000 RPMs, maybe 10,000 RPMs. And just walk that right around the cuticle line, and then that's going to flush the acrylic powder with the natural nail just so it looks like it's growing out from your natural nail and it looks a little bit better overall for shaping. And we are also going to use a ceramic bit next. This one does happen to also be medium grit, and then it is a safety ceramic bit, meaning that the end right there that gets close to the cuticle line is actually rounded, so you can get super close without hurting yourself or a client. Now this is going to finalize our shape even more. We're also going to apply a little bit more pressure as we move down the nail towards the free edge, so that way it can create an even more structured apex and get thinner at the tip like you would want it to be when you look down the barrel. I do also find it's important to kind of look at your nail like left side, right side, profile, underneath, down the barrel. So there's a lot of different views, but this is going to be super important to get that really crisp shape. You can spend as little or as much time as you'd like here, and for me personally, I build the nail a little bit thicker, knowing that I'm going to do this step last and finalize everything so I don't have to go back in and add to it. After I've done that step, I'm going to go ahead and switch my bit out to a cuticle bit, and this is going to be a fine bit. It is diamond, so it's not going to hurt yourself, and I do like to use it just to go underneath and make sure that none of the dip powder got under. There's no like acrylic build up, and then I can further make it look like rounded. So I'll do this last step before cutting any extra cuticle that was really dry, and then applying our cuticle oil, and you are all set. If you made it this far in the video, I definitely want to say thank you so much. And if you have learned anything, or if you have anything to teach me, please feel free to leave all of that down below in the comments. I love to read them and respond. I thank you again for any support, likes, shares, or comments, or a new subby, and I look forward to hopefully helping you in the future and learning something more that I can share with you. Thanks so much. Have a blessed day. Bye.
Say hasta luego. Muy bien, rapping kilo.